Hi, and welcome to the Grove Podcast. I'm Sara Badiali, your host. In these episodes, we try and bring you companies and people and discussions that we at Mangrove Investor feel are important. These are the parts of the business world that maybe you don't see every day. So we try and highlight nonprofits, private companies, and even some public companies, and show you the good that they're doing. So sit back and enjoy this episode, and thanks very much for listening. Hi, and welcome to the Grove Podcast. I'm Sara Badiali, your host, and my guest today is Sara Badiali. Yes, she's a relation. Sara has had a long and varied career in building, deconstruction, and material reuse. She's been working in this field since 2005, and she's going to tell us the story of how she accidentally volunteered at a reuse center in Portland, Oregon. She's the creator of the reclamationadministration.com blog, which is a building material reuse news and innovation database free to the public. It's been up for 10 years now. Sara helped to create Portland's groundbreaking building deconstruction ordinance, and she's provided the cities of Portland and Seattle with data, research, products, and training. She managed one of the longest running reuse marketplaces for over 20 years in Oregon. And she's the author of several articles and one infographic on building material reuse and deconstruction practices. She's currently working on a policy guide for creating a circular economy through deconstruction and material reuse. Sara, thanks for being with me today.
Hi, big brother. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to do this.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that.
I want to know how you accidentally volunteered at a reuse center.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I had applied to grad school and I got in, which is nice, in Portland, Oregon. And I was just coming off of doing some welding work. That's something I didn't put in my bio, is that I'm a welder. And I really wanted to be inside because, it rains a lot in Portland. And I thought, I'll volunteer while I'm in grad school and get my admin skills and my writing skills up to snuff, because when you're welding, you're just dirty all day and you don't really have to write anything. So one was a reuse organization for paper and art supplies and things like that. And the other one was a reuse organization for building materials. And I was like, well, reuse is just me in general, so I'll stay. So what they did was they said, okay, we'll take you as a volunteer. We'll put you in the office and you can coordinate our building deconstruction projects. And I was like, building deconstruction? Is that possible? Can you do that? I had no idea you could take a building apart. No idea. So I learned a lot, and that's how I ended up in that. I just ended up being lazy and staying in the same place.
15 years in that space now.
Well, I when I volunteered for our reuse center, they eventually made a position for me there, and so I was going to grad school at the same time, and it ended up flip flopping. Whereas I had been doing the reuse center for part time and graduate school full time, I ended up doing graduate school part time and reuse center full time when they started paying me, and I stayed there for probably 4 years and learned as much as you possibly can about how to take buildings apart from the office, because again, I didn't want to be outside anymore. But what I learned in that experience was the people that I was working with were very passionate about what they're doing, but there wasn't anything that let them know that there's other people in the country or other people around the world that were doing the same thing. So essentially, what I created was a newspaper about other reuse centers, other deconstruction companies, people who were taking apart buildings and reusing them, or barns and reusing them. So I would send out little clippings that I found every day to our staff who was out in the field and said, hey, look, you're not the only people that are doing this. So be proud of what you're doing, because you don't get paid a lot in nonprofits. And that's how I ended up making the Reclamation Administration. I just kept collecting all these stories and all these things from all over the place to make people feel like they were part of the community, even though they were disconnected from what other people were doing. So I decided to basically make a database. Yeah, it's a database. There's thousands of posts on that website.
That's cool. So let's kind of get into the basics. So when I think of building deconstruction, I think about our mom and dad taking that barn wood from that old barn and then using it as they used it inside as paneling. Do you remember that?
I do. I remember the splinters
Oh
from.
God. Oh, the splinters were a misery. But that's what I think
Yeah,
of. But I know we've come a long way since the 70s when people were doing that. So kind of walk us through what kinds of buildings and what uses you get.
sure. Well, it was only really recently that we stopped reusing things. And you remember our grandmother used to sing a song about the rag man
Mm-hmm.
and the rag man coming around to
Yeah.
collect the rags. That was a real thing. And people, it was just not in their purview to not reuse things. And that didn't really come along until built-in obsolescence didn't really come along until like the 70s and the 80s, maybe, a little earlier, but we just did throw things away. So we certainly didn't throw away buildings because they're massive,
Yeah.
and that is one of the problems with throwing away buildings is that they take up so much space in the landfill, and um, and we just can't afford it. We don't have landfills anymore that are big enough to carry entire buildings, especially if they only last for about 30 years. The average building, some statistics quote, really only sticks around for about 30 years. So you
Wow.
can imagine how much waste is going into landfills all over the world from that. As far as what kind of buildings and what you get out of them, you can take down anything and you can reuse pretty much anything. So, again, a lot of more progressive places will say things like, and then progressive places like Europe,
Mm-hmm.
96% of the building can be reused. Um,
And
or
so everything from like the toilets being reused as toilets to material being turned into artwork, or is a lot of it being reused
certainly,
in its old capacity?
yeah, you could take a window and use it as a window again, or a door and use it as a door again, or you could take the wood from inside the walls or the metal from inside the walls and make completely new products. Once
Mm-hmm.
it goes from virgin timber to regular wood, it's just wood, whether it's been used or not. And the same goes for metal. Um, really, the only thing that you can't reclaim out of a building is adhesives. So glues are
Mm-hmm.
not reusable; they have to go away. And hazardous materials like mercury inside thermostats or asbestos. Um,
Yeah, lead
we
paint.
discourage people from reusing asbestos.
Mm.
um,
PSA, all you listeners out there, don't reuse asbestos.
yeah. So, yeah, that's exactly it. So some things are products for the rest of their lives, or can be products. So like I said, a window to an electric, um, maybe like covering for an outlet. All those things can be just reused again.
Mm-hmm.
And um, yeah, there's people that their whole living, their entire industries are made based on reclaiming things from buildings. So everything from sunglasses and glasses frames, because they're really easy to take old wood
Mm-hmm.
from wherever structure. It doesn't necessarily have to be a building, could be a bridge or something like that, and then CNC them into sunglasses frames or glasses frames. And the great thing about that is they use smaller pieces of wood, so you can get a
Right.
lot of reuse out of that, and you can put it into production. Or you have a cottage industry, people who are reclaiming different items to turn into crafts and then selling those. So you have this huge spectrum. Um, Fender Guitars makes guitars out of reclaimed
Right.
structures.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen in my area, lots of reclaimed brick, where they'll take down some of the old factories. I was looking at one the other day. It was a denim mill in North Carolina, big old
Oh,
brick
cool.
factory, and they took it all down, and you could buy pallets of the reclaimed bricks, which I
Sure,
that makes
a
sense
brick
to
is a
me.
brick,
A brick is a brick,
and
exactly.
actually, quite a lot of these materials that are coming out, especially older buildings, are superior to the materials that we have available today. So they know that old growth wood is stronger
Mm-hmm.
than new growth wood, and we don't let our trees grow as long as we. They can't afford to do that. So,
Hmm.
but bricks, again, they're made from, it's not just the bricks too, it's the mortar in between the bricks actually made from different material than they use today. So it's easier to clean older bricks than it is to clean newer bricks. Now we put
Hmm.
cement in our
Hmm.
mortar, and it's really hard to get off of that clay. But the old bricks are great. So, and they're also people who love patina. They love the way they
Yeah.
look.
Yep.
That's probably why you're getting them, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. These had the manufacturer stamps in them. They were pretty cool looking.
Yeah, yeah, unique. And
Yeah. A little bit of
there's a
style. So.
yeah. I say that if you're into marketing for reclaimed products, it's a boom because there's so many different stories that can go with selling a reclaimed product, and that's
Hmm.
really what you're doing when you're selling something. Is you're trying to tell a story of why it's different than something other product that's like it on the market. For
Hmm.
reclaimed materials, um, reclaimed products, it's unique, it's environmental. There's a historical element to it. It's local, and you keep
Yeah.
money in the communities.
Hmm.
Um, it doesn't necessarily even have to be like designated historical from like a historical building. Historical could mean, there's a house that you grew up next to in the 80s and they're going to take it down and you want that front door because you looked at it almost every day of your life. It's just, it's an emotional connection that you have to that particular building. Same thing with churches and stained glass windows and things like
Hmm.
that.
Sure.
But it could be anything from like a wrought iron fence that again was on a cemetery or something that's local in your neighborhood that you would like to have.
You told me a cool
Uh,
story the other day about the old Yankee Stadium.
oh yeah, that's great. This is a good example to me of a small product that can earn a giant amount of revenue with very little re uh, very little required to do anything. So
Hmm.
you don't really have to do a lot of work. But anyway, they took the Yankee Stadium down a few years back, and these guys went in and took some of the seats that they were offering up for free, took them home, and turned turn them into watches, watch faces, and watch bands, and then sold each one of those with a number as a limited series for over $1,800 a piece. In the little
Hmm.
box and everything, and they sold it as um, both that emotional connection and the historical connection. It's a piece of Yankee Stadium, and their tagline was something like Yankee DNA. So who wouldn't
Hmm.
want, as a Yankee fan, something like
Yeah.
that? It's priceless to them, and of course they're willing to pay a premium price for that.
And it's art, because it's you have a limited quantity, limited run because you have limited materials. No, I think that's such a cool idea. And I love hearing about people that look at, because how many of us look at a house being demoed and like, it's just being demolished,
Or even see it. That's the thing. People don't actually see those things very, very much.
Hmm.
It's just part of the landscape. You don't
Yeah.
really even notice because it's just what we call um, what is it? Not development, but progress.
Yeah, exactly. They're tearing down that old building to build something new. And now Yankee Stadium is a little different because it is iconic, but there are plenty of folks with the kind of talented eye that can go into an old building that was maybe built in the 40s or 50s or 60s and see opportunities like that. They just need to be given the chance.
Oh yeah, there's reuse nerds out there that drool over stuff like that, like our parents do with barnwood
Yeah,
and in
exactly.
all the wrong places. But their hearts are in the right place. Can I tell you a story?
Sure.
It hits upon what we were talking about, the emotional and historical connection, and just maybe not even what somebody would consider a property or a building that's really valuable. There in Southern California, there was a building. I think it was a house that was in like I don't know, maybe built in the 70s. Anyway, Metallica, that was where they lived when they first started the band. So James Hetfield lived in his house and practiced in the garage with the band. Eventually, they became Metallica, this mega
Hmm.
superstar. And when they found out that that house was going to be demolished for progress, they went and got material from it, wood, and he had a guitar made from the wood from the first house that Metallica ever lived and
That's
practiced
really
in.
cool.
And he calls it Carl. It's got a name. And you can look up and listen to some of his interviews about how special Carl is to him. So he actually, refers to it that way. And yeah, he rocks on it. But that's a completely priceless item,
Right.
especially to James Hetfield.
Sure.
But to collectors out in the rest of the world, that's priceless.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah, I have
cool.
another story like that if you want to hear one more. I happen
Yeah.
to really like guitars. And for some reason, for me, the lens of reuse
Mm-hmm.
ends up being through a lot of rock and roll.
Huh.
So there's a luthier, a guy who makes guitars, who lives in Vancouver, BC, was reading the newspaper one day and saw that they were demolishing Jimi Hendrix's childhood home in Seattle. So he drove down and he went through all, the detritus from the demolition and gathered as much as he possibly could. So wood and wires and nails and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Went home and made an acoustic guitar from Jimi Hendrix's childhood home. He used the wood and he used the wire pulled from the walls to make the fretboard.
Oh,
The
wow.
frets in the fretboard.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that is another priceless item made for reuse. You just can't. You wouldn't be able to monetarily put as a cost.
Yeah, no.
So
That's art. I mean, that's really cool. Do you,
yeah,
so,
and it doesn't matter if those buildings are old or historical or anything like that. It's an emotional connection.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have a sense for where we are today in the United States in terms of buildings demolished, percentage of them that are actually being reused or reclaimed in some way?
oh, that's a good question. Very little.
Very little. That's kind of the
Very
sense that
little.
I had. Yeah.
There's a lot across the country. There are lots and lots of reuse centers and architectural salvage.
Mm-hmm.
And Habitat for Humanity has what they call the Restore. And the
Mm-hmm.
last time I checked, there was about 1,000 restores across the country. And then that's, in addition to mom and pop places that do architectural salvage. So there's always people out there who are doing this. I mean, it's strange where you find the people who are still salvaging, like stump grinders and just weird people on Craigslist that you'll see. But it's really very small, and that is one of the reasons why we had to make that's one of the reasons why we had to make an ordinance in Portland.
Right.
For people who cared about this, we have really beautiful old craftsman houses, and they're being demolished at like a blistering pace because property in Portland is very desirable,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a story that you could tell up and down the coast. But
Yeah.
Portlanders did get together and really wanted to do something about that. Plus, we're running out of room in landfills.
Well, and it seems a shame. I mean, those craftsman homes are so cool, and they have such cool little appointments in them when you go in, and they're just the little details in them that are just really, really cool. So, if people want to support this, are the reuse? Would it be through the Habitat for Humanity home, their reuse centers? How can people support reuse and deconstruction?
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't like to shop for things that are reclaimed, then you can always donate to those places.
Mm-hmm.
Awareness helps too to understand. There's a spectrum you can get. You could volunteer if you wanted to, but on a different. That's the very basic level. Being aware of that this is an opportunity when you go and you do something like update your home or build a new home. Try to have some kind of work with an architect or a designer or builder that is open to using reclaimed items. That
Mm-hmm.
on a very personal level, that's what you could do. Look at companies that are doing some kind of reuse in general would be great. So Google actually, when they move into an area to build like a new campus or something like that, they do deconstruct their buildings and they do reuse them.
Oh, that's great.
So you can actually look for wherever you fit in that spectrum. And yeah, of course, Habitat for Humanity. There,
Mhm.
that's good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have architectural reuse. At least one company that does architectural reuse. I just like to go and browse through all the stuff they have because you know it brings me back to my childhood.
Yeah, it's neat. I mean, one of the things that I really like about reuse, especially building reuse, is that when you teach somebody how to deconstruct a building, because you actually have to do it correctly.
Hmm.
One, because you want to get the materials out as full as possible, and two, you don't want anybody to get, smashed by a building that they took apart wrong. Is that when you peel back the layers of a building, you get to see how it was built,
Hmm.
and you can see people's personalities and how they nailed something in. And this is maybe something that you can relate to, because since our grandfather was a carpenter.
Hmm.
But you can see how they put it together and how their minds work. And for people who, especially young people or people who are trying to get into the trades, when you deconstruct a building, you get to see everything. You get to see how it was wired. You get to see how it was plumbed. You get hands-on experience with almost each individual thing through a trade,
Hmm.
framing and carpentry. And it's a really great first step into, if that's what you want to do, trades.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, Sarah, thank you very much for sitting here and chatting with me. And we'll do this again. I want to direct everybody to check out your website. It's www.reclamationadministration.com, and I'll put a link in the notes so that folks can find you. But thanks very much for spending part of your afternoon with me.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime, Matt. Have a good day.
You too. Well, look at that. You made it to the end. Thanks very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we're going to have a lot more coming. You need to sign up and become part of the Grove. Give us your email address, and we'll make sure you're notified anytime there's a new podcast coming down the pipe. Have a great day.